the main thing I just remember was Rupert Sheldrake filtered out this one comment from A.N. Whitehead. And that one comment was that inward is the past and outward is the future. And what immediately struck me was, yes, I totally get it. Yin and yang doesn't mean black and white. It means inward, outward, fundamentally, from a physics, etheric, flux theory point of view. And if that's the fundamental nature of any kind of change in the universe, inward versus outward, basically you just have to have opposites, black or white. But I think inward and outward is a much more useful fundamental word to use, because when you visualize the void as an inviscid fluid that's infinitely supercooled and zero viscosity and zero density, that flows in wildly, fractally nested, awesome patterns, and some of them end up resonating with each other and making music. And if that music continues to resonate long enough, it can hook up with other similar music notes and make something bigger, you know, and pretty soon you form human beings. And we are so complicated, in fact, that we can actually perceive our own selves. And it's all starting from the fundamental yin and yang principle of inward, outward, inward, outward. Let me tell you what this means in etheric theory as well as in metaphysics. Let me explain what I think it means, and I'm proposing this. And this is the first time I've talked about it because I just kind of thought about it in the last 24 hours. So if you stand a man on the earth, you have the earth and the sky. So the significant heavy mass bodies around him are the earth below him, and then the sky above, which has all the rest of the matter of the universe out there, you know. And so between these two, you have an inward pull of gravity to the earth, because the earth is pulling in ether. It's accelerating into the earth to form the gravitational constant G that we measure here when we hold a solid object on a scale. And then there's also the sky has to have an equal and opposite flow of that same ether going outward. And so what happens is, the way fluids naturally flow is like draining a bathtub. It would be like a vortex. So the gravity sucked in from the earth, or I should call it the etheric flux sucked in by the earth, caused by the earth's matter, is going to come in a vortex, and that is like, say, it's going through your body as you're standing there on earth. And then the sky is going to pull out an equal and opposite vortex that goes upwards. And so these two vortexes are twisting, and they're going in opposite directions, and they're superimposed upon each other. And so these two vortexes are twisting, and they're going in opposite directions, and they're superimposed upon each other. And they carry within them, because they are indeed accelerating etheric fields, so they carry within them any kind of little tiny particles in their way, fairy dust particles. And so, you know, it's kind of like sand in a tornado. And so there will be some interaction between the two tornadoes going in opposite directions. Well, this interaction is the most curious thing, because it just so turns out that that's what happens when a human being stands on the surface of the earth. Their body feels these two vortexes going into their body and going out of their body. And there's a lot of this phenomenon happening around us, and that's the fundamental nature of life, you know? But at the same time, if you have a tiny, tiny subatomic structure that has the same type of etheric flux structure, you know, the overlapping twisting vortexes that go in opposite directions, and they're sort of resonating in a note together, that would be a form of life, even at that subatomic scale. But, you know, who are we to say what it feels like to be that? We don't know, because we're not, at least don't know yet that we can actually feel that. So that's inward flow and outward flow as it pertains to the Blaney theory of etheric flux. You or I could tabulate yin and yang and then list all the different yin and yangs that come in our life. I feel like that would be a direct translation of the Chinese concept of yin and yang, rather than reading all the different language translations and then by the time it reaches me, it's translated it to black and white. And I would like to go to the source. And I think the source would actually be my own theory that I thought of along with many, many other people that are coming and awakening, sort of, and waking up. I mean, we have so much information available to us. We're all sort of figuring this out. And as you figure it out, you think that, oh, wow, I'm the only one that's ever thought of this. But actually, it's like a group phenomenon that everyone around me seems to be figuring this out also. So I'm just sharing my figuring it out with you to help you figure it out too. You're going to figure this all out too in your own way. I'm figuring it out based on a fluid flow model that I'm not going to worship the model or anything like that. No. And of course, no model's perfect. In fact, my model is just, Gödel's theorem has already proven that you can't have any perfect model of anything, because the etheric worlds in the universe are just nested too deeply. They're nested down to infinitely small size scales and infinitely big. So there's no way you could model it unless you had an infinite model. But everyone knows that's impossible, right? So let's just call it God. It's just like an unreal number. We know it can't exist because it's infinite. But if it did, it would have a name. God, right? So let's call it that. Oh, I'm so profound. I'm kidding. I'm just hanging out, blurting out weird ideas. So the table would look something like this. Ether in, ether out. Ether in is female, ether out is male. Qualities. Ether in is the past, ether out is the future, and I will explain that next. Ether in is the body, ether out is to the stars. Ether in is matter-like, because when ether flows inward, as it's condensed into a spiral, into a ring structure and a toroid structure, it looks like an electron, and that's condensed light. On the other hand, when you're flowing ether outward to the rest of the universe, outward in all direction, you know, the equal and opposite etheric flow that I spoke of earlier, that's an expansion and an outward flow, and that is gas-like because it's expansive. So contracting is the female past body matter-like thing, and expanding is the male future out to the stars gas-like thingy. So that's my little thing that I just was reading from my little notes. And another thing is, we're calling it inward-outward, but the most simple representation would be two balls on a spring that bounce in and out. The easiest way to see a vibrating body. And the principles of that vibrating body are basically the same for every form of vibration. But the other forms of vibration might get more complicated. But you could consider them as summations of this, you know, summations of springs. You could build the springs in a network and stuff. Okay, now I want to talk about why is inward the past and outward the future. Well, if I'm standing on Earth and I've accumulated a lot of ether flowing into my body, and then the mass, most of it flows through my body and down to the Earth. The downward flowing ether flows into the Earth, but some of the downward flowing ether, as well as some of the upward flowing ether from the sides as well, from all directions, flows into my body and is contained there because of the toroidal nature of the matter that condenses the light. So if ether's flowing in and it starts to twist to a spiral, like, you know how when you twist gas, it sort of looks like a thread? So it kind of twists into a thread, and goes into a little circle and sort of becomes a stable toroid or bubble ring structure. So these mass forms are condensed light because the light has flown into a little circle, and it keeps forever and ever and ever sucking in the ether and twisting and twisting and twisting, going around and around and around forever and ever and ever. So, and it's not really accumulating so much, it doesn't accumulate so much mass as to for the math to break down. The math doesn't break down, in other words. You can have the infinite flow of the zero viscosity, zero density ether because its viscosity is zero, so there's no resistance to flow at a certain infinitesimally small size scale. But I digress on that. Now, why is inward the past? Because as I stand on the surface of the earth and the ether flows into me and it swirls into these little vortices that go into my matter particles that are my body, that's accumulating these etheric entities. Any fairy dust that was in that ether is sort of in my body until it dissipates. Like, say if there's a universe of a smaller scale in a fairy dust particle that happened to fly in through the ether and hitched a ride into the light ring. Again, it's a universe size down size scale, so it's too small to imagine, but it was there, and it flows into the side of the twisting photon that flows in a toroidal shape to make the electron. It just stays there forever. Well, until for that time scale and that length scale, for that universe to eventually dissipate, because our universe is going to dissipate sometime in the far future, right? But the whole universe goes by in 1 nanosecond, like 42 nanos. So this super small universe is there until it dissipates. And so that's why it's our past, because it went through our body, that would be present, but then after it exits it and goes around and around inside those electrons, it's kind of like trapped there. So if I want to get that past memory out, I have to somehow communicate with that, pull it back out. This sounds so bizarre, but it's really beautiful from a mathematical point of view. It's informational. The information flows in the ether into that small scale. Now, I don't hope or care to dig that out. That's different than the memories stored in a meta pattern of myself that we call our mind. That's you could think of from a yin-yang point of view, the inward-outward time thing is more like my body reflects my history. Like what you eat and how you live your lifestyle and all the thoughts you've thought kind of form who you are. Every thought you think is going to affect your biology, which will affect your biology now and tomorrow, because if you're tense all day today, tomorrow you might have a headache, so it's all connected. So in that sense, it's in your body. Now, comparing that to outward flow being the male, expansive male star's point of view, meaning stars out there, it's just the reverse of that, because there's ether going upward and flowing outward to the heavens, and that flow direction, that's our future. So the outward is our future, because the fairy dust in my body now is now being sent outward. And in the future, I'll see it. To sum up this video now, I wanted to talk about the philosophical aspects of inward flow being the past and outward flow being the future. And all that implies with the etheric flux theory. The philosophical point was begun that we human beings with this privileged ability to occupy this amazing body, brain, heart system and interact with each other on this gorgeous planet, we want to be filters for the etheric flux. You see, we have a certain etheric flux pattern throughout our body that's actually a flux pattern that's one with the entire universe. But you don't have to go there for this argument. I mean, you know, if you know that, that's fine. But if you don't know that, you will know that. So I'm this etheric flux pattern, but when good sounds pass by, I can filter it out of the random ether to reinforce my own resonance. And I might expend a little bit of food to do that, you know, like a little bit of energy might be used up as heat in order to do that. But I'm utilizing a stored energy in the ether and extracting it out and spending stored energy in my muscles as well to exist and do things like, you know, with my muscles in order to help mine this energy out of the ether, which produces me, and as it passes through the twisting motions in my body at all those different size scales of twisting and so forth, it forms a beingness of existence. And that beingness of existence, that consciousness, that me-ness, that sense of I am, that wordless feeling of conscious now, that is kind of what we all are. And the physical manifestation of that you would see if you had eyes to see would be an etheric flux pattern that's ringing like a song or dancing like a dance. To sing and dance your life and leave a sweet echo behind. Just like the echo becomes our future because you're putting beauty into the future by having an outward expression of your art. So I'll close on that. And peace.